So good evening everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. Today is 9th December 2025 and today we have some very important topics for the today's discussion. So one by one we'll be discussing all these important topics in detailed and in-depth manner. And in fact the first topic with which we are going to start this discussion is about India-Russia summit. So let's understand this India-Russia summit in detail. What is its significance and how India and Russia are going to shape the future of the region, and apart from that the global order as well. So we'll be understanding this in detail. So let's first understand the timeline of India-Russia relations. So because it is very important to understand the chronology of India-Russia relations. So first of all, in 1947, both India and Russia have established the diplomatic relations. Now, immediately after independence in 1947 itself, India and Russia have established the diplomatic relations. And followed by that, very importantly, in 1975, so India's first satellite, which is named as Aryabhatta, was launched on the Soviet launch vehicle called Soyuz. Now, this is a very important thing. And apart from that, in 1988, so this year, Kudamkulam nuclear power plant agreement was signed between India and Russia. Now, in fact, Kudamkulam is one of the largest nuclear power plants in India, right? So, in fact, Russia has established this Kudamkulam nuclear power plant in India, and we have been engaging with Russia very closely on this nuclear energy front as well. And followed by that, in 1993, so Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation has been signed by these two countries to further strengthen, to further elevate their relationship, right? So they're already enjoying a strong relationship. In order to further elevate their relationship, in 1993, they have signed this Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation. And followed by that, in the year 2000, so Declaration on India-Russia Strategic Partnership was made. Now, in fact, this Declaration of India and Russia Strategic Partnership has led to the annual summits between these two countries. Now, in fact, in these annual summits, the bilateral relations between India and Russia will be reviewed in a comprehensive manner so that the existing challenges might be dealt. And apart from that, in the year 2010, these existing strategic partnership further elevated to special and privileged strategic partnership. Now, as of now, both India and Russia have been enjoying a special and privileged strategic partnership. And in 2021, recently 2+2 India-Russia ministerial dialogue has been started, right? So between the defense ministers and the foreign ministers of both these countries, this 2+2 dialogue has been launched. And apart from that, we have this 2+2 dialogue with Japan, US and countries like Australia as well, along with Russia. Now let's first understand about this India-Russia summit and its importance. Now, what is the strategic context of this India-Russia summit? Now, in fact, this is the 23rd India-Russia summit, and we all knew that this summit took place in New Delhi. However, so when this summit was taking place, if you look at the global order, it is a turbulent global order, because we already knew about this Russia-Ukraine war, Israel-Hamas conflict, and apart from that, the unpredictability of the US and the trade war, tariff war. So therefore, we can say that the world is a turbulent world order, right? So it is turbulent because it is shaped by the Ukrainian war, which has placed India key partners such as Russia, US, Europe in a conflicting positions, right? So in fact, Russia and European Union themselves are in a conflicting position. US and Russia are in a conflicting position, and European Union and US are also in a conflicting positions with respect to the Ukrainian peace deal proposed by the US. However, so if you look at the India's diplomacy, India from the beginning of this war started supporting peace, right? So settlement of this dispute through peaceful means and through negotiations. However, so in this context, India's diplomacy must navigate a treacherous geopolitical terrain. Now, this geopolitical terrain that India has to navigate, it's not easy, right? So India has to navigate a treacherous geopolitical terrain. Now, in this treacherous geopolitical terrain, what India needs to do? India needs to balance the different interests along with its strategic autonomy. And at the same time, India should also avoid the zero-sum alignments in this context. right? So this 23rd summit has been taking place in the backdrop of an unpredictable, a turbulent global order. The reason we already discussed. And apart from that, so all these countries which are involved in this Ukraine's peace deal are in a conflicting positions at this point of time. India's primary aim is to maintain its strategic autonomy along with navigating the complex and turbulent geopolitical order. So this is very simple, right? So in fact, in 1947, as we have already discussed, that both Russia and India have started establishing the formal diplomatic relations, first thing. And secondly, very importantly, in 1971, the Treaty of Peace and Friendship Cooperation was signed between India and erstwhile USSR. Now, when this cooperation for the Treaty of Peace and Friendship has been signed, so Russia has also supported India during the India-Pakistan War of 1971. And in 2000, both these countries have announced a strategic partnership. And in 2010, the strategic partnership has been elevated to special and privileged strategic partnership between India and Russia. Now let's understand the optics that that have been signaled in the 23rd Russia-India summit. Now, in fact, so this visit of Russian President Vladimir Putin can be considered as first Indian visit, right? So this is going to be the first Indian visit since the Russia's invasion of Ukraine or Russia's Ukraine war, right? So in fact, he visited India with a high-level delegation, and that has signaled the priority Russia has actually been according to India. Now for Russia, India is very important because India is one of the largest buyer of Russian oil, first thing. The second thing is that Russia is able to sell its arms and ammunition to India. Third, India is a country with a huge demographic dividend. So India can send its demographic dividend to Russia. So that will help Russia stabilize its economy. And apart from that, India can also supply other essentials to Russia, and because of all these reasons, Russia has actually been according a highest priority to India. This is the first thing. And apart from that, we all knew that both these countries are enjoying a very close relationship. And the relationship has also been elevated to special and privileged strategic partnership. Now, in this context, India's red carpet reception. So this red carpet reception to Russian President Vladimir Putin has showcased the strategic confidence, particularly on the part of India when it comes to maintaining ties with all major powers. Now, India is the best example of balancing ties with all major powers across the world, right? So India has best relations with US, with Russia, with European Union and other major countries as well. So therefore, India has been navigating very carefully, protecting its strategic autonomy. However, so the presence of Kirill Dmitriev. So this guy is Kirill Dmitriev, and he played a very, very important role in back channel peace efforts between US and Russia with respect to this Ukraine war. However, so he also came to India along with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and that hinted at India's implicit support for ongoing US-backed peace initiatives in Russia-Ukraine war. So this is another aspect that we should understand in this. Now let's understand what is India's position on the Ukraine's peace process. So we should also understand this dimension as well, because peace in Ukraine is very important, right? So if there is a peace in Ukraine, then there will be a stability in relations between Russia and European Union and Russia and US also. So that will help India maintain good relations with all these major powers. Otherwise, we need to balance, we need to navigate this complex geopolitical order, right? So let's understand what is exactly India's position on Russia-Ukraine war. Now, India expressed an unambiguous support for peace negotiations. And in fact, it aligns closely with the initiatives which are associated with the US leadership. So that means India from the beginning supported peace in Ukraine. So India's stand is not a neutral stand. So India stands by the peace in Ukraine. So therefore, any peace agreement, any peace negotiations that India might strongly support, right? So if those peace negotiations are not against the Ukraine's interests, not against Russian interests, so India may support those negotiations. So we have to understand this. And apart from that, so here European Union is a major key stakeholder. So this is a key stakeholder. So therefore, India's challenge will be to preserve its expanding ties with European Union. And in fact, for India, European Union is very important in terms of trade, in terms of diaspora, in terms of technology, in terms of environmental cooperation. In all these areas, European Union support to India is very important, right? So however, US peace agreement in Ukraine, US peace agreement in Ukraine, and this peace agreement is proposed by US President Donald Trump. However, the European Union is not happy with the points mentioned in this peace plan. Now, in this context, the challenge of India will be to preserve its expanding ties with European Union while maintaining a strategic balance if India is supporting this peace plan proposed by US President Donald Trump. However, so we have to understand another dimension, which is timing advantage. So what sort of a timing advantage we have been expecting in this context? Now, Russia's current battlefield advantage and US's reduced focus on Ukraine. So that increase the relevance of India's overall engagement at this point of time. Because Russia has already made a significant gains in the battlefield, firstly. Secondly, US at any cost wanted to end this Russia-Ukraine war. And US is also showing a little interest in Ukraine. So at this point of time, India's role becomes very, very crucial and a very important, particularly at a time Russia has been maintaining a very good and a very friendly relations with India. And the world also believes that India can actually put pressure on Russia to end this Russia-Ukraine war, bring Russia to the negotiating table. So let's understand strengthening the bilateral pillars of both India and Russia relations. Now, first thing that we should understand is economic and trade cooperation between these two countries, because both Russia and India have ambitious goals of doubling their bilateral trade by the year 2030, and apart from that, achieving $100 billion of trade between these two countries by the year 2030, so which is an ambitious goal, right? So what are the key features of the program 2030 that they have launched in this 23rd Russia India summit? Now, so adoption of program for development of strategic areas in India Russia economic cooperation till 2030. So therefore, the measures will include the following areas. So what measures that they would likely adopt as part of this program 2030? Now, in fact, both Russia and India, so they trade on a number of areas. They trade in number of areas. So why don't they have the bilateral trade settlement in the domestic currencies? So the focus should be on settlement of this trade through the domestic currency so that Russia can evade the sanctions, and at the same time India can also lessen its dependence on US dollar. This is the first thing. And second very important thing is the existing trade basket. For example, if you look at India-Russia trade, so around 60% of the India-Russia trade is dominated by energy. So why don't we diversify it? Why don't we bring in other products for the trade? For example, we might bring in food products. We might bring in fertilizers, right? So processed foods, fertilizers, and even, pharmaceuticals as well. This is also a very important component. So why don't we bring in all these important components? Why don't we diversify the trade basket? So that is going to benefit both these countries. And also understand, as of now, the India-Russia trade. So if you look at the India-Russia trade, the trade balance. So if you look at the trade balance, so India has a huge trade deficit. So India has a huge trade deficit. So this is the major problem. So if we diversify the trade basket, then India may have a competitive advantage, and India may also start exporting commodities to Russia. So that is the idea here. And apart from that, there are several non-tariff barriers as well. So the focus should be on reducing or removal of these non-tariff barriers. And apart from that, the bilateral trade should be 100 billion US dollars by the year 2030. So these are the key and focus areas between the cooperation between India and Russia. Right. So apart from that, there are some other areas that India and Russia have been cooperating with each other. For example, energy. Right. So in fact, Russia became the major supplier of crude oil for India, and Russia is also started supplying natural gas for India. And apart from that, Russia is the major defense supplier of India. So Russia has been supplying major defense equipment to India, right? So apart from that, the bilateral trade has also been strongly expanding over a period of time, right? So it is poised to reach 100 billion US dollars by the year 2030 as well. And in fact, it has evolved right from the Cold War times, fall of the disintegration of a Soviet Union, emergence of US as a sole superpower after the fall of USSR, and then emergence of a multipolar world order, and the resurgence of Russia, where India and Russia have started strengthening their bilateral relations. So all these things have been taking place, and you can also go through it as well. Now let's understand another very important dimension, which is energy security between India and Russia. Right. So if you look at the energy security for India, energy security is very important because it is one of the largest consumer of the energy or crude oil, I would say. So for India is the world's second largest fossil fuel importer. If you look at all the countries, India is the second largest fossil fuel importer. So India is a very big consumer and importer of crude oil because of the increasing needs of energy security. So therefore, there is a need to secure affordable energy is a national security imperative for India, first thing. The second thing is that Russia's vast reserves are crucial and important. However, a failure to deepen cooperation risks ceding space to China or US companies as well. So let's understand the connectivity and new areas of cooperation between these two countries. So if you look at the connectivity, there are emerging new areas as well in the areas of cooperation. For example, Chennai-Vladivostok Maritime Corridor, that this 23rd summit of India and Russia, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi has emphasized on, and apart from that, the access through the Northern Sea Route. So these three, international north-south transport corridor. So these connectivity corridors will improve India's access to the Central Asian region and also Russia as well. Secondly, shipbuilding collaboration and Arctic cooperation. This is also a new area of collaboration between India and Russia. So that also includes training for Indian seafarers. And then migration, skilled labor agreements, because India is a country with a huge demographic dividend, and India can also supply this skilled workforce to China to meet its workforce demand, right? So therefore, Russia is also facing demographic challenges and India is having demographic dividend. So in this context, between India and Russia, there should be a migration and skilled labor agreements as well to meet the labor shortages that Russia has been facing. And in fact, simplified tourist visas. Now, the simplified tourist visas will boost people-to-people cooperation, people-to-people ties between India and Russia, further strengthening the bilateral relations. And defense and space technology is another very important arena where these two countries have been closely working on and collaborating a lot. So, for example, Russia has supplied S-400 missile defense systems. And apart from that, India and Russia have been cooperating with respect to the BrahMos. So BrahMos supersonic missile, which is one of the most advanced missile in the world, right? So however, Russia is also one of the largest supplier of defense equipment to India. However, so the increasing levels of localization, technology transfer, joint production, so they actually represent the positive shift that is actually required. However, the future cooperation will focus on niche, high technology defense systems as well. However, if we talk about the conclusion, so how can we conclude this, right? So in fact, the summit, this 23rd India-Russia summit, so this 23rd India-Russia summit reflects a determined effort to recalibrate and modernize India-Russia relations. The focus is on recalibrating and modernizing existing strategic partnership between India and Russia, and at the same time make sure this relationship is resilient because of ongoing US-China dynamics and in a multipolar, unpredictable world order. So however, India is actually positioned itself as a bridge and a partner to both West and Russia. And in fact, India is actually guided by its policy of strategic autonomy and long-term national interests, right? So therefore, India actually positions itself as a bridge and also the partner in both West and Russia. Now, so let's understand another very important topic, which is about the neurotechnology in India. So what is the potential of neurotechnology in India and how India can benefit from this neurotechnology? So let's understand this aspect as well. Now, what are the applications that this neurotechnology will actually have? Now, if you look at the applications of this neurotechnology, so it has applications in healthcare, education, defense, and even consumer technology as well. So but first let's understand what exactly neurotechnology and what are its applications in detail, right? So what is neurotechnology exactly? Neurotechnology actually involves a set of tools, right? So in fact, with this set of tools that directly interact directly with the brain to record, monitor, influence the neural activity, right? So in fact, this neural technology has been emerging as one of the most transformative scientific frontiers in the world, right? So this is the significance of the neurotechnology. Now, however, if you look at the applications of neurotechnology, you can look at them as well. For example, in healthcare, so they have applications in the diagnostics, treatment, rehabilitation, and even neurological disorders. However, in education, they enhance the learning attention, defense, cognitive augmentation, stress monitoring, and combat settings. So therefore, the neurotechnology is actually having a wide range of applications, and for a country like India, with a wide range of challenges and emerging technology, skilled workforce, healthcare, and education challenges, neurotechnology is very important, right? Now, in fact, this neurotechnology actually involves BCIs, which is brain-computer interfaces. So this brain-computer interfaces to neural simulators and neuroprosthetics. So these technologies are redefining the existing possibilities in healthcare, education, rehabilitation, computing, and even strengthening the national innovation capacity as well. So that kind of a potential that this neurotechnology actually holds. However, now if you look at India, now India is having a large neurological disease burden in the world, right? So apart from that, India's rapidly advancing biotechnology and artificial intelligence, right? So these technologies have been advancing and also emerging in India. So they actually offer artificial intelligence and neurotechnology, both critical health solutions and even a major economic opportunity as well in India, right? So let's understand how the neurological disease burden in India can be addressed. So firstly, one thing that we should understand that there is a high prevalence of neurological disorders in India, right? For example, between 1990s to 2019, so if you look at the disorders, neurological disorders from stroke, injuries, and other diseases like Parkinson's, depression, so they are actually growing at a significant pace in India's overall disease profile. First thing. So over a period of time, so the disease burden may increase enormously in India with growing number of population. However, the stroke remains one of the largest contributor to the neurological disability in India. However, how this neurotechnology will help address this problem of disease burden in India? Now, in fact, a tool called a neuroprosthetics. So these neuroprosthetics enable paralyzed patients to move robotic arms. Right? So they can actually move robotic arms, wheelchairs, prosthetic limbs using brain signals. Now you have got the brain signals, but you are unable to move your organs. You are unable to move your arms, legs. But if you have these neuroprosthetics, so you will be able to move them with just the command of your brain. So that is the main advantage with this. And apart from that, the deep brain simulation. Now, in fact, this deep brain simulation is effective when it comes to managing Parkinson's disease and even severe depression that people have been facing. However, so if you look at the brain computer interface or BCI based tools for rehabilitation, they can actually accelerate the motor recovery among the stroke survivors. So there is no doubt that the neurotechnology is actually having a wide range of applications to address the growing burden of various diseases or disorders in India. So the thing is that we need to apply the neurotechnology and its tools in a right manner, with a policy, with regulations, with skilled manpower, promoting innovation and even private startups in this arena. However, it will also help us transform overall mental health care as well, because over a period of time it will help us reduce our dependence on long-term medication, right? So long-term medication is not required because the neurotechnology can have applications to address these diseases in a much more effective and efficient manner. For example, the targeted neural simulation, they can treat the conditions such as a depression that if people have been facing, or obsessive compulsive disorders. And apart from that, the chronic medication use, which is very common among a number of people for their lifestyle diseases. So therefore, the neurotechnology can actually reduces the dependence of the people on these chronic medication, and its side effects will be reduced, and even the economic burden of such a long-term treatment can also be minimized in a very efficient and effective manner. However, there is a need to boost research and innovation capacity in this context. However, so in fact, we have an academic and institutional strength. For example, we have IITs, several research institutes, public research institutes, private research institutes. So what we have to do, we need to leverage the existing institutional strength. For example, India has major centers such as National Brain Research Center at Manesar and even Brain Research Center at Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. So we need to strengthen the capacities of these institutions to benefit out of this neurotechnology. However, let's understand the economic and strategic advantages of neurotechnology. Now, in fact, neurotechnology, it can be merged with artificial intelligence, biotechnology, engineering, computing, and even all fast growing Indian strengths, right? Because these all are the technologies which have been growing, emerging at a faster pace. Right? So in this context, neurotechnology can be combined with all these emerging technologies so that new applications can be found out, can be used, it can be used in a better manner. Apart from that, investments can be made, so proper investments can be made so that India can become a global hub for effective neurotech devices, just as it did with generic medicines and vaccines. Now India is a leader of generic medicines. India has been producing world's largest amount of generic drugs and also exporting these generic drugs to other countries. And in fact, these generic drugs are also affordable for the people compared to the branded drugs. Right? So in fact, the genomic diversity that India has, so this genomic diversity can also be leveraged for effective usage of effective applications of the neurotechnology, because it actually provides us a unique advantages for developing more accurate neural models, improving AI neuroscience integration. However, there is also a need for a regulation, and there is also a need for the ethical preparedness as well, right? So for this, why don't we have a tailored pathways? So these tailored pathways are based on the risk of the neurotechnology, invasiveness of any such applications developed out of the neurotechnology, and purpose are essential and important to ensure the safe innovation. Secondly, the public engagement on ethics, privacy, and autonomy. So they are also the crucial elements in developing the neurotechnology, especially the brain-computer interfaces handle the intimate neural data, because the technology has been rapidly growing, emerging. So with emerging technologies, there are concerns with respect to privacy. What about the ethics, and also about the autonomy? So these things should also be kept in mind when you are making regulations for this neurotechnology, right? However, so there is no doubt that neurotechnology has a large potential, and it can also reshape India's overall healthcare landscape and healthcare architecture, and it will help further strengthen the scientific research, scientific architecture in India, and it will also open a new wave of economic growth as well. However, with strategic regulation, investments, ethical safeguards, India can not only address the significant neurological disease burden, but also emerge as global leader in the next generation brain technologies. So if we leverage the neurotechnology in a rightful manner. So the next important topic is, what is India's post-Dhruva framework? And this has been given in the Hindu newspaper. So let's understand. So India post-Dhruva framework. Now, in fact, India's post system is one of the largest postal system in the world, and it has recently launched a Dhruva framework of achieving a new address system, right? So in this context, let's understand what exactly is this. So Department of Posts has proposed Dhruva. Dhruva is a digital address infrastructure. So in fact, it is a digital address infrastructure of all the people, enabling a secure, standardized, and consent-based address sharing. So you can share your address, but only based on the consent. For example, you are regularly sharing your address with the e-commerce platforms. You are sharing your address with the food delivery platforms. You are also sharing your address with the India Post as well, right? So however, it may violate your privacy as well, right? It may not be good always to share your address with those people. So therefore, it actually deals with consent-based address sharing to different platforms. Now, so this Dhruva, which is a digital address infrastructure, it is linked to DigiPin, and it is supported by amendments to Post Office Act of 2023. Now, so this Dhruva system actually aimed at transforming the governance, logistics, and even digital delivery services, thereby potentially impacting the overall architecture, the overall address sharing architecture framework in India, right? So through Dhruva framework, smart addresses will be developed. So how smart addresses will be developed? Let's understand this. So this draft amendments to the Post Office Act of 2023 will enable an interoperable system. So this interoperable system will replace the physical addresses with smart labels like name, @entity. And in fact, it is being powered by DigiPin for the precise geolocation of an individual. Right. Now, in fact, as we have understood that it will replace the address with the labels, and these labels will be provided by the address service providers. while consent architecture will be managed by address information agents. However, it will be based on the DigiPin system, and this DigiPin system will involve a 10 character alphanumeric expression of latitude, longitude coordinates. However, this technology is developed to provide a more precise locations to the e-commerce sites in rural areas, or in cases where the textual expression of a physical address does not offer an adequate information about the address. So precise geolocation. So it will also address the concerns with respect to the privacy of individual, and this draft amendment is under consultation. Section 8 entity proposed, like National Payments Corporation of India for UPI, right? So like how for UPI, National Payments Corporation of India has been created, in a similar way for this very same Dhruva DigiPin, so there will be an entity as well to facilitate this framework. However, the system will be built as part of the government's digital public infrastructure initiatives and will allow the private firms to participate in this domain as well. So this is about the Dhruva, that is a digital address infrastructure that India Post is planning to develop and launch, right? So that's all for today, and thank you so much. So if you have any suggestions, please write those suggestions in the comment section, and thank you so much.